She was only 7 years old when she destroyed a wedding. One folded piece of paper, 15 words, and in the span of 60 seconds, an entire family would never be the same. This is the true story of the little girl who saw too much the night before the wedding, and how her courage to speak up saved a man from the biggest mistake of his life. But it came at a cost no one saw coming. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now imagine this. It's June 2023, a warm Saturday afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina. The Grand Oak Estate is filled with 200 guests dressed in their finest clothes, white roses everywhere, a string quartet playing softly. Everyone is smiling, crying happy tears, holding their phones up to capture the moment. The bride, 29-year-old Sarah Mitchell, looks absolutely stunning in her lace gown. The groom, 32-year-old Michael Hayes, stands at the altar looking like the luckiest man alive. They've been together for 4 years. Everyone says they're perfect for each other, but there's a little girl sitting in the third row, clutching a folded piece of notebook paper so tightly her knuckles have turned white. Her name is Emma. She's Sarah's niece, and she knows something no one else in that room knows, something she wishes she could forget. The question everyone would ask later was simple. How does a 7-year-old girl end up holding the power to destroy a wedding? What could she have possibly seen that would make her do what she did? And most importantly, why didn't any of the adults notice what was happening right under their noses? These are the questions that haunted this family for months afterward. Because when you're 7 years old, you're supposed to be thinking about dolls and playgrounds and ice cream. You're not supposed to be the one who uncovers a betrayal so deep it shatters lives. But Emma wasn't a normal 7-year-old. She was quiet, observant, the kind of kid who noticed everything. Teachers called her an old soul. Her parents said she had always been too mature for her age, and on the night before her aunt's wedding, that awareness would lead her to witness something that would change everything. The note in her hand contained 15 words. 15 words that Michael hadn't read yet. 15 words that would stop the wedding cold. Let's go back 6 months. December 2022. Sarah and Michael had just gotten engaged on Christmas Eve. It was a beautiful proposal. Michael had taken her to the same restaurant where they'd had their first date 4 years earlier. He got down on one knee right there in front of everyone. Sarah said yes through happy tears. The video went viral on social media. 12,000 likes, hundreds of comments saying they were relationship goals. Sarah's family was thrilled. Her parents loved Michael. He was a high school teacher, coached basketball on weekends, volunteered at the local food bank. The kind of guy parents dream their daughters will marry. Sarah worked as a nurse at Charleston Medical Center. She was dedicated, compassionate, always picking up extra shifts to help her coworkers. Everyone thought they knew her. Everyone thought they understood who she was. But there was a side of Sarah that only a few people had seen. A restlessness, a need for something more, something different. It started small. She'd come home from her shifts and seem distracted. Michael would ask her how her day was, and she'd give short answers. She started working later. More overnight shifts, more texts that she'd quickly hide when Michael walked into the room. He noticed, but he didn't say anything. He trusted her. That was his mistake. By March 2023, wedding planning was in full swing. Sarah's mother had taken charge of most of the details: the venue, The flowers? The catering? Sarah seemed happy enough to let her mother handle it. She was busy with work, she said. Too many shifts. Too much stress. But the truth was, Sarah had met someone. His name was Marcus Webb. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative who visited the hospital twice a month. 35 years old, charming, confident. The kind of man who knew exactly what to say to make a woman feel seen. They'd started talking during his visits to the hospital. Innocent at first, just friendly conversation. Then coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Then lunch at a restaurant 3 blocks away. Then texts that turned into phone calls that turned into late-night meetings in hotel rooms across town. Sarah told herself it didn't mean anything. She was just having fun. Just blowing off steam before the wedding. She'd end it after she got married. She loved Michael, she did. But Marcus made her feel something different, something dangerous, something she couldn't resist. And she convinced herself that as long as Michael didn't know, it wasn't really hurting anyone. Friday night, June 16th, the night before the wedding. Sarah's family had gathered at her parents' house for a small pre-wedding dinner. Nothing fancy, just close family. Her parents, her younger brother, her sister with her husband, and their daughter Emma. Michael was there too, laughing and joking with Sarah's dad. Emma sat quietly in the corner, coloring in her book, listening to the adults talk. After dinner, Sarah excused herself. She said she needed to go back to her apartment to make sure everything was ready for tomorrow. Michael offered to come with her, but she said no. She wanted some time alone, to center herself, to prepare mentally for the big day. He kissed her goodbye and told her he'd see her at the altar. Sarah drove to her apartment, but she wasn't alone. Marcus was waiting for her. She'd told him this would be the last time, one final night before she became someone's wife. One last moment of freedom before she committed to forever. Emma's parents had decided to stay overnight at Sarah's parents' house. It was easier that way, close to the venue. Emma would sleep in the guest room upstairs. But around 9:30 that night, Emma couldn't sleep. She was excited about the wedding. She loved her Aunt Sarah. She'd been chosen as the flower girl. She wanted to ask Sarah about her dress one more time. Emma's mother told her that Aunt Sarah had gone back to her apartment. It was only 15 minutes away. Emma begged her mother to take her, just for a few minutes. She wanted to see Aunt Sarah's wedding dress one more time. Her mother was tired. She'd been helping with wedding preparations all week. She said no at first, but Emma persisted. Finally, her mother agreed. They'd make it quick, just a 10-minute visit. They drove to Sarah's apartment complex, a modern building near downtown Charleston. Emma's mother parked in the visitor lot. They walked up to the second floor. The lights were on in Sarah's apartment. Her mother knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Emma's mother tried the door. It was unlocked. They walked inside. The living room was empty. The kitchen was dark. Then they heard voices coming from the bedroom. Laughter. Low voices. A man's voice. Emma's mother froze. She stood there in the hallway, trying to decide what to do. Should she leave? Should she knock on the bedroom door? She was confused. Maybe it was Michael. Maybe they decided to spend the night before the wedding together after all. But the voice didn't sound like Michael's. Emma had wandered toward the bedroom. Her mother hissed at her to stop, but Emma was curious. She pushed the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. What Emma saw in that moment would be burned into her memory forever. Her Aunt Sarah was in bed with a man who was definitely not Michael. They were wrapped in sheets, laughing, kissing. Emma didn't fully understand what she was seeing, but she understood enough. She understood that this was wrong, that Aunt Sarah was supposed to marry Uncle Michael tomorrow, that this man wasn't Uncle Michael. Emma's mother grabbed her daughter's arm and pulled her back immediately. She didn't say a word. She just picked Emma up and carried her out of the apartment as quickly and quietly as possible. They got back in the car. Emma's mother was shaking. She drove back to her parents' house in complete silence. Emma kept asking questions. Who was that man? Why was he in Aunt Sarah's bed? Why didn't Mommy say anything? Her mother finally told her to be quiet, to not tell anyone what they'd seen, that she needed time to think, to figure out what to do. But Emma couldn't stop thinking about it. She couldn't stop seeing the image in her mind. And she couldn't stop thinking about Uncle Michael, about how he was going to marry Aunt Sarah tomorrow, and he had no idea. He had no idea that Aunt Sarah was lying to him. Emma couldn't sleep that night. She lay in the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what she'd seen. Her mother had told her not to tell anyone, but how could she not tell? Uncle Michael deserved to know. He was nice to her. He always played games with her at family gatherings. He always asked about school. He always made her laugh. And Aunt Sarah was going to lie to him. She was going to stand up there tomorrow and promise to love him forever. And it was all a lie. Emma got out of bed. She found a notebook and a pencil. She sat on the floor in the dim light of the hallway and wrote a note. Her handwriting was messy, the letters crooked and uneven, but the message was clear. She folded the note carefully. She held it in her hands. She didn't know if she'd have the courage to give it to him, but she knew she had to try. The next morning, the house was chaos. Everyone was getting ready for the wedding. Hair and makeup, dresses and suits. Emma's mother looked exhausted. She avoided eye contact with everyone. She hadn't told anyone what she and Emma had seen. She still didn't know what to do. Part of her wanted to confront Sarah. Part of her wanted to tell Michael. But another part of her thought, maybe she should just stay out of it. Maybe it was none of her business. Maybe Sarah would end the affair after the wedding, and Michael would never have to know. They arrived at the Grand Oak Estate at 2 in the afternoon. The ceremony was scheduled for 3. The venue was even more beautiful than Emma had imagined. Tall white columns, gardens full of flowers, a fountain in the courtyard. Emma wore her white flower girl dress. She held her basket of rose petals, and in her other hand, hidden in the folds of her dress, she held the folded note. She watched as the guests arrived, as they took their seats, as the string quartet started playing. She watched Uncle Michael walk down the aisle with his parents. He looked so happy, so confident. He had no idea what was coming. Emma's heart was pounding. She kept looking at her mother, hoping for some sign, some indication of what she should do. But her mother wouldn't look at her. The music changed. It was time. Aunt Sarah appeared at the back of the aisle. She looked like a princess. Her dress sparkled in the sunlight. Her smile was radiant. Everyone stood up. Cameras flashed. The wedding march played. And Emma made her decision. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let Uncle Michael marry someone who was lying to him. As Sarah walked slowly down the aisle, Emma stepped out of her place in line. Her mother reached for her. But Emma moved too quickly. She walked straight up to Uncle Michael. He looked down at her, surprised but smiling. Emma's hands were shaking. She held out the folded note. Uncle Michael took it, still smiling, thinking it was maybe a sweet message from his flower girl. He unfolded it slowly. Emma watched his face. She watched as his smile faded, as his expression changed from confusion to shock to something that looked like pain. The note said, "Uncle Michael, last night I saw Aunt Sarah in bed with another man. I'm sorry, I thought you should know. Love, Emma." The guests were still standing, still watching Sarah walk down the aisle. The music was still playing, but Michael wasn't moving. He was staring at the note, reading it again. His hands started to shake. Sarah reached the altar. She stood next to him, still smiling, waiting for him to turn and face her. But he didn't. He just stood there, staring at the piece of paper in his hands. Sarah's smile started to fade. She looked at the note, then at Emma, then back at Michael. Her face went pale. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. The music stopped. The guests began to whisper, sensing something was wrong. Michael finally looked up at Sarah. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the front rows could hear him. "Is this true?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Emma, at her sister, at her parents, then back at Michael. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Michael's voice got louder. "Sarah, is this true?" She started to cry. She tried to grab his hand, but he pulled away. The guests were standing up now, trying to see what was happening. Whispers rippled through the crowd like waves. Emma's mother rushed forward and grabbed Emma, pulling her away from the altar. But Emma kept watching. She needed to know what would happen. Sarah finally found her voice. She tried to explain. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. She loved Michael. She wanted to marry him. But Michael wasn't listening. He looked at Emma's mother. "Did you know about this?" Emma's mother nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I found out last night. I didn't know what to do." Michael let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He looked around at all the guests staring at him, at the decorations, at the life he thought he was about to start. Then he looked at Sarah one more time. "I can't do this." He turned and walked away, down the aisle, past the shocked guests. Out of the venue. The wedding dissolved into chaos. Sarah collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing. Guests were talking loudly, trying to figure out what had just happened. Some people left immediately. Others stayed, gossiping, taking videos on their phones. Emma's mother took Emma outside. Emma was crying now too. She hadn't wanted to hurt anyone. She just wanted Uncle Michael to know the truth. Her mother held her and told her it wasn't her fault, that she did the right thing. But Emma didn't feel like she'd done the right thing. She felt like she'd just ruined everything. Inside the venue, Sarah's parents were trying to calm her down. She was hysterical. She kept saying she needed to find Michael, that she could explain, that she could fix this. But there was nothing to fix. The truth was out. Within hours, the story had spread across social media. Videos of Michael walking away. Photos of Sarah crying at the altar. People who weren't even at the wedding were commenting, sharing, giving their opinions. Most people supported Michael, called Sarah a cheater, called Emma brave. But some people criticized Emma's mother for not handling it privately. Some people said Emma was too young to understand what she was doing. The family was torn apart by the aftermath. 3 days after the wedding, Michael finally agreed to meet with Sarah. She begged him for a chance to explain. They met at a coffee shop near his apartment. Sarah told him everything about Marcus, about the affair, about how she'd planned to end it after the wedding. Michael listened without saying a word. When she finished, he looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Emptiness. You were going to marry me, knowing you'd been unfaithful. You were going to let me promise my life to you while you were lying to my face. Sarah tried to reach for his hand. He pulled away. I loved you, Sarah. I would have done anything for you. And you threw it all away for what? For some guy you barely know? She had no answer. Michael stood up to leave. Before he walked away, he said one more thing. Thank Emma for me. She saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. 6 months later, Michael had moved to another city. He'd taken a teaching job in North Carolina. Started over. He never spoke to Sarah again. Sarah had to face the consequences of her choices. She lost her job at the hospital after the scandal became public. Lost most of her friends. Her relationship with her family was damaged. Her parents barely spoke to her. Her sister, Emma's mother, cut off contact completely. As for Emma, she had nightmares for months. She blamed herself for destroying the wedding, for making Aunt Sarah cry, for hurting Uncle Michael. Her parents took her to a therapist who helped her understand that she wasn't responsible for the adults' choices. That, telling the truth, even when it's hard, is important. So let me ask you this. If you were in Emma's position, would you have given Michael that note? Would you have stayed silent to protect your aunt? Would you have told your parents and let them handle it? And if you were Michael, could you have forgiven Sarah? Could you have gone through with the marriage? Or would you have walked away just like he did? Comment below. Tell us what you think. Because this story raises questions we all need to ask ourselves. What do we do when we know a truth that will hurt people we love? When is it our responsibility to speak up? And when should we stay silent? Emma is 11 years old now. She hasn't seen her Aunt Sarah in years, but she still thinks about that day, about the note, about the choice she made. Her mother tells her she was brave, that she did the right thing. But Emma still isn't sure. She saved Uncle Michael from a lie, but she also destroyed a family. And that's a weight she'll carry for the rest of her life. If this story moved you, if it made you think, hit that subscribe button. We share real stories like this every week. Stories that make you question what you would do in impossible situations. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We read every single one. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the smallest voices carry the heaviest truths.